Today, we're taking this piece right here and giving it the ultimate post-apocalyptic look. So welcome everybody, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield, and today we're going to be diving back into my series on upgrading my Fallout laser rifle cosplay piece. So what I'm doing here today is I've talked a little bit about in some of the Mod Podge coding episodes about using Mod Podge as like the ultimate 3D printing post-processing thing for post-apocalyptic stuff, and that's what I'm doing today. We're going to start with your basic 3D print, which this guy here I created using the method that I've showed off several weeks ago in terms of creating a 3D object from a video game reference. And we're turning it into this guy here, this corroded, rusty, nasty looking fusion cell. So when you've got your 3D printed part, the first thing you want to start off with is to sand it down. Now, this is a post-apocalyptic thing, so you can take a little bit of liberty here and probably get away with things that other people would scream at and throw a fit at. In this case, I'm using my oscillating multi-tool with a very fine grit sandpaper on here. I believe it's 220 grit sandpaper. And I'm just going to go over the entire surface, sanding down any imperfections from the 3D printing process, as well as essentially just kind of getting rid of a lot of the 3D print rinds. Now this may damage the print a little bit, but you know, like I said, it's post-apocalyptic. It's not that big of a deal if you have a few blemishes here, because this entire process we're going through, in a lot of ways, is about making artificial blemishes so that you end up with these kind of corroded metal sections like I showed you just a minute ago. So as we're going through the rest of the steps here, if you do screw something up, don't worry about it. It's a happy accident, you know? Work with it and make it into part of the final finished piece. After the sanding process is done and you've got, you know, what looks like most of the print lines honestly kind of removed with a very aggressive tool, we're going to move on to applying multiple layers of Mod Podge hard coat. Now there's a whole variety of Mod Podge type products out there. I like the hard coat one for coating my 3D prints. Now this process is pretty straightforward. I'm actually just following the instructions that are on the bottle. So you're going to make several layers of this Mod Podge, coating your entire 3D print with maybe 15 to 20 minutes to dry in between each layer. And once again, if you accidentally screw up part of the layer, don't worry about it. Work with it later into the final overall crappy look of the piece. After you've got all the layers of the Mod Podge done, we're going to continue on with instructions where you want to wet sand the piece with some very fine grit sandpaper. Now be careful here with this wet sanding of the Mod Podge. This is a water-based glue type substance. You want to just get your sandpaper damp. You don't want to get it too wet. If you get it too wet, you're going to actually end up reverting the process of the Mod Podge, and you're going to find yourself like liquid Mod Podge all over your hands and the final piece. If you dampen it a little bit, that will get rid of some of the bumps without doing a whole lot of that whole going back into liquid Mod Podge kind of a thing. It takes a little bit of experience to figure this out, but once again, screwing up's not a bad problem here. Then, with these layers of Mod Podge done, what you want to do is actually aggressively damage your coating. So if we jump back to some of these close-up looks here at the finished pieces, these areas that are rusted and corroded, you probably can't tell them too well from the images, but they actually have a little bit of depth to them. And that's because what I did is I took some very low grit sandpaper. In this case, we're working with sometimes as low as 60 grit, and I'm intentionally removing several layers of the Mod Podge. One of the interesting aspects about this material is that it fails in a way that helps get this corroded metal look, where you can actually visibly see through the layers of the quote metal unquote. You just got to apply the paint later on to make people believe that it's corroded metal. And you know, you don't have to limit yourself just to sandpaper. Feel free to use knives, other tools like that. It's all up to you to get whatever effect you're kind of like. I just like using the sandpaper to kind of bust through some of the layers. And if you want to even go back down to the 3D print and kind of take away some of that, you feel free to do that as well. So our Mod Podge layer is complete. We now want to take these guys out and hit them with some spray primer. After 2 coats of the filler primer, I'm going back in the basement and we're doing some more sanding with a very fine grit sandpaper and doing a little bit of wet sanding to try to get a decently finished smooth area in all the places that are not the corroded metal parts. Now we're ready to give these guys their awesome coat of paint, so let's do that right now. So first thing I want to do is give these guys a metallic base of silver. I'm just quickly dry brushing on a very light silver color, nothing fancy here. This combined with both the primer as well as the PLA's gray color will just give you a very simple metallic undercoat in case the paint peels off, or more importantly you want some of the metallic color to show through. It is important that the areas that are going to be your rusted spots do have the silver pretty well thoroughly covering them. So this back part here is like an olive green, just drab military-ish style color. So I'm going to just take some normal acrylic green, dull it down with gray, and call it good. The area around the damaged spot, you want to leave some of the silver visible. For the next step, we're going to apply a little bit of a trick for miniature wargaming. So I'm going to take some water, put it into our paint mixture, not very much, just a little bit of water, thin the paint down, then apply several layers of the thinned down paint to help hide your paintbrush strokes a little bit. Now I'm going to repeat this process except using yellow for the other part of the fusion cell. And I am mixing a little bit of water, that way after a few layers of paint, it will help to hide the brush strokes. So at some point you're going to get sick and tired of trying to get the yellow color correct, and you're just going to say, screw it, that's good enough. Yellow is a notoriously hard color to paint and get nice coverage with, so don't worry too much about it if it's not perfect. Once again, it's a worn down post-apocalyptic thing, so a little bit of faded paint is not a bad thing to have. Now for the details, I'm going to switch over to using some miniature paints just because they're kind of better for this kind of thing, and along with some miniature brushes. So I've got some of my Games Workshop brushes, Army Painter brushes, those kind of things to go for the next step. For this part, I'm just going to look at the reference image I took from Fallout 4, and just paint the details of what I see there. You got a little plus minus sign, gonna clean up some of the silver around the top of these pieces, and then there's a few red details like arrows, lines, and some illegible warning text. Now we need to make it look a little bit dirty and kind of run down. And for that we're just gonna use some black paint. Some people like to cover these whole things in black paint and wipe it off. If you like to do that, that's fine. I tend to just apply it a little bit more selectively and then wipe it off, just so you don't get a total darkening of the piece, but your choice is really up to you. So the last thing to do is to finally get back to the little damaged sections we put in the Mod Podge primer 3D printed parts, right? So things like there, and so on. And we want to make them look all rusted and just trashed out. And for that I'm going to go back to the miniature paints. So this time I'm going to be using some brown. I've got Army Painter's Leather Brown. I have Citadel Shades Seraphim Sepia. This is a wash type paint. And then most importantly is going to be the orange, and I'm using Troll Slayer Orange from Games Workshop Citadel line of paints. So how this process is going to go, I've got a dry brush right here. And I'm going to first apply a whole bunch of the leather brown around anything that I want to be rusty. In particular, I'm going to be focusing on those damaged areas we added to the piece. Another thing to think of as you're doing this, water can kind of run the rust downwards in the direction of gravity. So if these fusion cells are sitting like this on a shelf, you may want to work the direction of the color of your dry brushing rust down towards the bottom. Or with the leather brown dry brushing done, I'm going to get out a darker color, in this case Rhinox High, which is a darker brown color. I'm going to dry brush some of that into my rust. So exactly the colors you use for your rust doesn't matter a whole lot, but rust is a mixture of brown colors, so you want to get that variation of color to sell the fact that it is indeed rust and not something like mud or dirt. And there's a few more things we're going to do here in a moment to really sell the fact that this is rust and not dirt. Now, two more things to really sell this as rust, and the first is to apply the very small amount of orange color. This is very important. That's a very small amount. It's just enough to essentially add highlights to the rust because orange is basically a brighter brown color. Now the last and final step of this whole project altogether is one more effect for selling the fact that this is rust, and that is where the Seraphim Sepia wash comes in. Once again, it goes back to the idea that water runs down and brings the rust with it. So you want to take this wash and basically run it down in the direction gravity would be pulling it down. And that, once again, sells the whole effect of rust versus dirt. Well, I'm happy how those all turned out right there. You can see that is pretty much my workflow from start to finish for post-processing 3D prints to make them look like they're post-apocalyptic corroded metal. And well, that is one more part of the laser rifle done. Now I'm going to end up with 4 of these things eventually. I got the 3 that I painted off last night, and I've got the 1 that I had to leave blank for the video purposes. But the idea is, whichever one's the coolest is going to actually go in the rifle. The other 3, I'm going to modify my little ammo sling over here to actually so I can carry them across my chest like they're on a bandolier type situation. So that'll be fun, but that's going to be later on, post laser rifle, all that fun stuff. So with this project done, or this, I guess this little mini project done, I think I've only got 2 episodes left in the Fallout Laser Rifle Upgrade series. I've got the trigger mechanism to figure out, and then it's going to be time to put all that together, do some merging of the EVA foam parts, as well as the 3D printed parts, coding, some mechanical work, redoing the electronics, all that fun stuff, to hopefully make a really awesome looking Fallout laser rifle. So with that, once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield. If you want to see more videos in this laser rifle series, go ahead and hit that subscribe button to get those when they come out, as well as other cosplay, tabletop gaming, robotics, woodworking, and I have no idea what else I might be up to in the future. I tend to just jump around and do random projects every now and then. So with that, thanks for watching, and have a great week.